Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Caccera, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Caccera.
Welcome in, Joe Caccera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you for those that are tuning in on Facebook, social media, and obviously listening, downloading the podcast. Going forward, I'm going to do one podcast a week, primarily here on Tuesdays, just really geared towards keeping everyone updated on how COVID-19 is affecting real estate and lending, and also some ideas that could help people in times like this with their mortgage, with financing, with looking at debt. You know, I've done this radio show I was thinking over the weekend, for almost 9 years, over 1,700 shows now with live radio and podcast, and we do nothing but study the market and real estate and lending. That's what we do. We've been providing this information to all of you for years, and we get, you know, anywhere from 10 to 12,000 or more downloads a month. So there's a lot of people that follow the show, listen to the show, and so what I was thinking over the weekend, I really need to take this information at a time like this and use it to help people even more than we normally do. And what I mean by that is, certainly it's great to have updates and information and, you know, what's going on in the marketplace and how does it relate to lending and financing and interest rates and buy and sell. All that's great, don't get me wrong. But right now, we need to get granular about how we could help people financially, maybe in some situations where they normally wouldn't need that help. So I'm going to talk today about the market, about financing, what's going on in financing, a little bit about real estate, but I'm going to spend most of the show giving those some ideas of what you could do to save money, offset some cost, look at different liabilities right now, and prolong some payment, do some different things that might help you. I mean, there's going to be, I don't know how many people, but certainly millions of people are going to be affected by this, and they're going to lose their job. They're going to lose potential income. Some people will be laid off. Some people will be, you know, alternated down to part-time. Some people won't get their bonuses. Some people won't get their commissions. A lot of people will be affected by this, you know, this change in the marketplace because of COVID-19. A lot of people will be affected financially. So what I'm going to focus on every week now, going forward on once a week, is, you know, ideas, suggestions, help, some options that people have available to themselves to help them financially in regards to their mortgage and financing. So let me first start and talk a little bit about the mortgage industry and the market. It's changing rapidly. So first and foremost, the thing that I want everybody to understand is lending is still vibrant and lending is still out there. So we are helping people every day with refinances and purchases, and that's going full swing. Now, some of the things that are changed, as I mentioned before, appraisal's a little slower. Some people don't want appraisers to go on their home. Some of the appraising companies are, you know, backing off on appraisals, and they're trying to, you know, really abide by some of these, you know, shelter in place and some of these other, you know, issues around lending. But lending is a necessity. Financing is a necessity. Now, some people might say, well, not really, because why do you need to go buy a home in times like this? Well, because people still are going to buy homes. Now, there's going to be less activity, but buying a home is a necessity. I mean, it might be that you're changing jobs and you're moving and you have to buy a home. It might be that you're renting, right? And you're getting kicked out, or not kicked out, but your lease is up and you're not renting this place anymore, and you're going to buy. It could be that you need to buy a place for your parents that can't live by themselves anymore. There's all kinds of reasons why you need to buy a home. So financing is essential, and it's still taking place, and we're still financing homes, whether it be refinances or purchases. But one of the things that's changing drastically, and most of the consumers wouldn't know this because they're not real big brand names, but I could tell you in the last 4 or 5 days, from last Friday till today, there have been at least 7 or 8 lenders that have quit funding loans and quit taking new applications. And a lot of these you're not going to know by name because they're mostly behind the scenes wholesale, or they do what's called non-QM financing. And the reason I bring that up is that regardless of who you're working with, be real careful right now, more than ever before, about, I'll give you an example, like if you're working with a broker right now. What a broker does, if most people don't know, is as a mortgage broker, let's say it's ABC Mortgage, and they're a mortgage broker. What that means is they broker everything out. They don't lend their own money. They don't have warehouse lines. They don't fund those loans in their name like big mortgage bankers like New American Funding, a lot of these others, or Wells Fargo. Everything they do, they broker it out. So mortgage brokers, you would come to them and they'd say, depending on your profile, financing, et cetera, they'll say, okay, we have 10 different lenders we could work with, and we think lender A and lender B are going to be best suited for you. Well, right now, a lot of mortgage broker operations are really being affected by this because that's additional exposure that some of these lenders don't want. They don't want exposure of someone else selling their product and them taking the responsibility for it, and they may not be able to sell it. So it's complicated, but all I could tell you is that lending is still going full bore. However, there's been a lot of changes. Be careful who you're working with. Some will stop funding for a while. Some will start taking applications for a while, and we'll see how that changes. Interest rates, let me give you a little update on interest rates. They're still artificially high. Right now, based on the 10-year yield and what's happening in the in the marketplace, the rate should be really back in the low 3s. But right now, they're in the mid to high 3s. I would say right now the 30-year fixed is 3.625, which historically speaking is still a very good interest rate. Don't get me wrong, but based on what's going on in the marketplace, the 10-year yield, and what's happening in the mortgage-backed securities, these conforming interest rates should be in the low 3s, which I think they will get to here in the next several weeks. So update on rates. Rates are still pretty good. Where you're going to have some rates that are really strange and across the board is anything that's not conforming, jumbo, a little bit odd, it depends. Just in general, it's an unsettled market, but the money's still out there. Things are a little bit slower, so be careful of that. One of the things I brought up, too, last week was if you've been approved on a purchase, let's say you're out looking for a home or a refinance or whatever, and you've been working with someone for the last couple of months or even 30 days or even 2 weeks for that matter, go back to them and see if anything's changed. Go back to them and say, can I get an updated pre-approval letter? Am I underwritten approved? Because things have changed. Guidelines have changed. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes there's been lenders before this big unsettlement in the marketplace right now. There's been lenders, I'll give you an example, that said, we will do a loan and we'll qualify you all the way up to 50% debt-to-income ratio. This is, in our business, is debt-to-income ratio is they look at your debt, obviously, and your income, and there's a ratio there depending on a threshold from a risk-based decision of whether they're going to lend you money or not. And some 50%, traditionally, most investors, most lenders don't like to go more than 43%. And that number we use just generically so everybody has kind of a frame of reference. When I say 43%, is 43% is they look at your gross, not your net, they look at your gross income. And then your housing expenses should not be more than 43% of that gross income, if that makes sense. So for the easy math is if you make $10,000 gross, then your housing expenses shouldn't exceed more than $4,300 a month, right, basically. The reason I want to give this explanation real quickly is that some lenders go a little higher. Some investors went a little higher. They said, we'll allow you to go to 50% debt-to-income ratio. Well, to give you an example, some of those have been now tightened, and some of those are more conservative now. So for that lender you might have been approved at that was allowing a higher debt-to-income ratio, right now they may have limited that and said, no, we're going to go back to 43 because we don't want to take any additional risk right now in an uncertain market like this. So all I could say in summary is a lot has changed in the last 2 weeks, more than I've seen in the last couple of years. So I don't want to alarm people as much as I want to educate and inform you in that. Make sure you're working with someone you trust and is giving you updated information on a regular basis. So that's kind of the summary of lending. The last thing I'll say about lending, I've said this before, for those that kind of missed the boats, the rates hit an all-time low about 2 weeks ago, and I think it was, I don't remember the day, but I remember it was Thursday, Friday, and then the following Monday the rates were at all-time lows, and then they bounced back up, and they're a lot higher now. I do believe they're going to settle back down. So my recommendation for people are to take advantage of that is get your application in. This is what I'm advising clients. We have hundreds right now that are doing this. Get your application in, get approved, get the paperwork here, and then what you could do is when the rates hit bottom or when they get low enough to where they're at the number that you're looking for, we could lock you in and then move forward. I've said this before, and as I kind of close out on the mortgage side, when these lows in the market hit, when the rates hit all-time lows that people talk about, I'm telling you, I've done this before for years. I've seen it. They don't hit the lows and they don't hang around for 4 or 5 weeks. They just don't. Don't ask me why. I think there's too much volatility. People take advantage of it. They close the pipelines. What I could tell you is when rates come down to their lows, they last for 2 or 3 days. They just do. And so expect more of that. So get your paperwork in, get that started if you could benefit from a refinance. Okay, real quick, real estate market has come to a slow, kind of a creeping, kind of slow, and really, I wouldn't say, so there's still homes on the market, there's low inventory. Most people are hesitating now and withholding. They're not going to be putting their home on the market. A lot of people that had planned to for obvious reasons. They're trying to abide by the laws, but also they're probably holding off also because there's less and less activity. When you think about what's going on right now, it's not that people can't afford it and they may want to buy a house or sell a home, but because of how COVID-19 has affected the shelter in place and limited access to open houses and showing buyers homes and all that has made an effect on the market for sure. Now, if you still want to buy a home, you can still buy a home. If you want to buy a home that's listed on the market, you just have to understand that because of what's going on, there's going to be less inventory on the market. So what's odd about this dynamic right now is usually when there's low inventory, it's a strong seller's market. This is the first time that I've seen, I think, been working in this business for 20 years, this is the first time I've seen a market that has low inventory, which is really going to be a buyer's market. Think about it, because it's supply and demand. Normally on low inventory, it's a seller's market. Right now, it's a buyer's market. So I'm not suggesting get out there and buy just to buy, but if you're in the market to buy, I'm serious about this. You're going to be able to find, I would say, some deals. You're going to be able to find, as this goes on a little bit longer, some opportunities to buy a home, and possibly for 10, 15, 20% less than it might have gone for a month or so ago. I don't know that for sure, but I would say this, for those potential buyers and people are still in position, I would keep that approval and I would keep your eyes open and see what's going on, see what's happening in the marketplace if you're interested for sure. But it is slowed. Real estate industry is slowed. Most companies are not allowed to list more homes. Most companies aren't allowed to show homes, do open houses, or any of that. So that's certainly going to be slowed down. But if there's still a home on the market, or if you know of someone that's trying to sell a home and they don't put it on the market, you could still make an offer. You still can. That's happening, and financing is available. Okay, so let me talk now about some ideas, solutions, suggestions I have for those people that may be affected financially by COVID-19 here. And I'm going to give you some ideas and examples. Now, I'm going to preface and I'm going to start this by telling you I'm not a CPA, I'm not a tax expert, I'm not a financial advisor at all. So I'm going to give you some suggestions and ideas, but before you implement these or consider these, I would always say consult with your CPA, a tax expert, or consult with a financial advisor if you have one. But here's some of the ideas, or here's some of the things I want to share with you today, because I know a lot of you are looking at a variance of what's coming in income-wise and then what your liabilities are, and you're going, where can I cut? What kind of adjustments can I make? So I'm going to make some suggestions. Some might be obvious, some may not. So one of the first ones is credit card debt. If you have credit card debt, right now is a great time to look at transferring that credit card debt, to maybe a 0% interest credit card for the next year, 18 months. A lot of these credit card companies, you've seen them before. It's promotional, right? They say transfer a balance, and it's 0 interest for the next 12 or 18 months. So that's one idea. Another idea is, if you have debt, outstanding debt, is to consolidate it right now and try to manage those. If you think your job or your income is going to be affected in the next, let's say, 3, 6, 9, 12 months, these are some things you should look at right now, because if your job is affected and you're no longer making the money you were before, or you're not in a job, it's likely you're not going to be able to get a mortgage. So I'm telling you, I've seen this before. What I'm saying is, don't go out and get a refinance or redo your mortgage just to do it. But if you're in a situation, you're sitting here right now today and you're listening to this podcast, and by the way, if this doesn't apply to you, please do me a favor and pass it on to people you think it might be, this information, because it could help a lot of people. I'm already getting a lot of requests for this kind of information and feedback. So credit cards, consolidate. One way is to transfer to a 0 balance, right? The second way, the second thing to do is to potentially get a refinance, cash out, pay off the credit cards, pay off high interest debt, pay off certain things that are burdening you each month. Credit card's one. Maybe it's a home equity line. That's another one. It could be a number of things, but look at all your debt, find out if it makes sense to pay off any of those and consolidate. A second thing to do, and again, this is a little bit, you don't typically want to do it in a market like this because the stock market is down, but let's say you're tight for money and you need another 5, 10, 15, 20 grand, I don't know, maybe more. Remember, most of you could borrow up to 50% of your 401k. Okay? So if you have $100,000 in your 401k, most of them, the terms of use and the terms of withdrawal on some of those, most of them allow somewhere between 40 and 50% up to a maximum. Typically, I don't know, all of them are different, but let's just say they allow 50%. Okay? So that means you could loan yourself, in essence, you could loan yourself up to $50,000. You could take $50,000 from your 401k. You establish a payment plan. When you borrow money from your 401k, you have options. You could pay it off in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Some are different. Now, some people might say, again, a financial planner, someone might say, well, Joe, this doesn't make sense because the market's down 30 or 35%. Why would they borrow money right now? Well, that's true. In a perfect world, you don't want to. But what if you're tight? What if you're short $10,000? What if a medical bill comes up and you need to pay it? What if you have interest on something you're paying 20 or 25% on? What I'm saying is these are things to do temporarily to get you through this time. And here's another thing to think about the 401k that I think that I like about it when you use it or you have to use it. It's your money and you're paying yourself back. So it's not like the great part about borrowing from your 401k, you're not paying penalties on it unless you don't pay it back. You're borrowing from your 401k, you're paying it back at what rates you decide in terms, and it's your money. So it's back and forth, your money. So that's one option. Another thing to look at. Again, always consult with a financial advisor and or CPA for sure, tax advice, because everybody's in different tax situations. When I give you these ideas and suggestions, it's because I've helped people for 20 plus years. I've done this radio show for 9 years, and I've helped a lot of people with some great suggestions. But again, I'm not a tax expert, I'm not a CPA, and I'm not a financial planner. So, 401k is another one. What is another one? One of the other things to think about is an interest-only mortgage. Some people will say, oh, gosh, I don't know what they are. Other people will go, oh, aren't those the dangerous loans? Because they remember the days when the mortgage meltdown. So let me tell you about interest-only loans. I refer to them as cash flow mortgages. And typically interest-only loans are still used, and I think they're a very, very valuable product. I love them for the right person in the right situation. Some of the people that love interest-only loans and use them effectively and are really smart the way they're used are business owners, small business owners, medium business owners, large business owners, people that are self-employed. And the reason why they like interest-only loans is because they use it for cash flow. In other words, if they have a good month, then they put a lot towards their mortgage. If they don't have such a good month, then they make their interest-only payment. It's a great, that's why we refer to it as a cash flow mortgage. So, let me tell you, in some cases, where an interest-only loan would make sense for someone. And this depends on the value of your loan. I would tell you this. If your loan amount is $400,000 or $500,000 or more, you could typically benefit from an interest only in reducing your monthly liabilities temporarily until you get back on your feet, or temporarily until you're starting to make more or get your job. I would say this, if you're thinking about it, again, start the process, get a mortgage before your job is in jeopardy. Let me give you an idea. And again, for most people this doesn't make sense, but some it might, and this might help someone, and that's why I'm going to share it. Let's say you're sitting here right now listening to this podcast, or some of your friends, family, or coworker could use this information. Pass it along to them, please. And let's say you have a $500,000 or $600,000 mortgage with a decent interest rate in the 3% range, and let's just say your payments, $37 or let's just call it $4,000 a month. This is just for sake of this conversation, $4,000 a month. You could get an interest-only payment, and again, this depends on the loan amount, and it depends on the interest rate. But you could save anywhere from $500 to $1,200 a month in your payment. Now, when I say save, here's the difference. With an interest-only loan, you're only required to pay the interest only. Now, you can pay principal if you want, but let's just take two examples for sake of this conversation. Let's say you go from a $4,000 a month payment to a $2,500 a month payment because you went to an interest-only. That's a $1,500 savings per month. That's a lot of money for some people. It really is. That's a lot of money. That could be the difference of taking that $1,500 and paying some debt, paying some bills, maybe an education, maybe groceries. It could be all kinds of different things. Now, here's the nice thing about this is temporary. Don't think about this long term. And rates are going to be good for a while. Look at this as a temporary solution to get through a temporary problem that we're having right now in the marketplace. This is for people who might be losing their job, their income's coming down, they're affected by it. Maybe one of the spouses, maybe there's a couple, maybe there's a partner, it doesn't matter. What if someone in the household is no longer going to be making income? An interest-only loan allows you to go back and revisit that. So what you do is you refinance into an interest-only loan. You reduce your payment. In this case, let's say we're using for the example, you go from $4,000 to $2,500. It's a $1,500 reduction. And you use that money the way you wish. Now, maybe you want to still make the $4,000 payment. You could do that if you want. You don't have to make the interest-only payment, but it allows you that cash flow and the ability to do that. Here's the last thing I'll say about the interest-only, which is great. Then when the market changes, you get your job back, you start your commission, you get your bonuses, maybe one of the spouses or your partner or someone goes back to work, then you just refinance out of the interest only back into a principal and interest loan. It's that simple. There's no penalties for doing this. I see people do it, and the reason I wanted to bring this up today is that I think a lot of people don't know they could do these types of things. Don't let your pride get in the way. If you're going to put your family in financial jeopardy, or to lose your house, or to get behind on bills or education, if you can make some of these decisions temporarily. And that's all these are. These are decisions to be made temporarily during times like this. And so I wanted to share that with you today, and will be more and more each week. So real quickly, consolidating credit card debt's one. You could do that by transferring balances to a zero interest rate. You could do it by refinancing. You could pay off a second mortgage, consolidate a first and second. Rates are still good, and I think they'll be even better in the next couple of weeks. You could go to an interest-only loan. I just talked about that. What are the other things you could do? We talked about borrowing from your 401k if you needed to. Some of the other things you could do, this is a little more involved, so I'm not going to get into detail, but some people have margin accounts with their financial investments. They could, literally temporarily borrow money from their margin accounts if they need it. There's a lot of different things that you could do. The last thing I'll say, which, again, some people don't understand it's out there, is you could leverage equity in your home for temporary cash as well, or you could do that with other properties. Let's say your primary residence, you have a loan on, you love the loan, it's great, but you need some extra cash. And you have an investment property or a second home. Maybe it makes sense to take money from one of those properties to pay off debt or to put you in place. I know a lot of people right now that are trying to figure out, they're looking at their budgeting right now. I just talked to a commercial broker who's very, very successful just yesterday. He called me for some advice. This is an extremely successful commercial broker who makes a lot of money, believe me, and he told me that because of the deals they had on the books that now will not close, will be delayed, his income is going to be down 50 to 60 to possibly 70% by the end of the year what he anticipated on making. Think about that. So you start a certain lifestyle and you make a certain amount of money for that lifestyle, and if that gets cut by 50, 60, 70%, that has a tremendous effect on your bottom line. And instead of going into debt overnight and getting into big trouble, try to look at some of these solutions to help yourself out. All right, as always, I'm here to help. I'm going to extend this on a regular basis. Please, if you have any questions, reach out, joe@reradiolive.com. You could also call or text me 408-838-9060. That's 408-838-9060. Even if it's to bounce ideas off me, to get suggestions, I'm happy to help any way I can. I know there's a lot of people that are going to be struggling to try to stay on their feet and get back on their feet, and I want to do whatever part I can with this show and our expertise and knowledge to help those people out there. All right, thanks again for tuning in today. Again, if this doesn't apply to you, please take this podcast and pass it on to family, friends, and coworkers as well. Take care. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.